No one thought that a dry piece of bread and a plastic cup of water would spark a corporate revolution. But that's exactly what happened when Derek Patterson, a quietly powerful black tech CEO, boarded flight UA4428 bound for New York, clad in a designer hoodie and limited edition sneakers. He wasn't looking for attention. He was preparing for the final phase of a billion-dollar airline merger. What he got instead was a public humiliation served cold. "This meal fits you," the flight attendant said with a smirk, placing the bare tray in front of him. Laughter flickered through the cabin. No menu, no options, no dignity. By the time the plane landed, the entire crew would be facing suspension. The captain interrogated, and the airline's executive board summoned to an emergency midnight briefing. And none of them knew they were being, what, because Derek didn't just occupy seat 2A in first class. He was quietly auditing every interaction, every failure, every bias. He didn't raise his voice, he raised the system. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. The early morning light spilled gently into the master bedroom of the Patterson residence, casting long golden rays across the hardwood floors. Derek Patterson stood at the foot of his bed, his movements precise, his breath steady. He folded the last shirt into a sleek black carry-on, zipped it up, and placed it beside the bedroom chair with the same care he used in constructing million-dollar deals. His watch read 5:42 a.m. Just enough time for breakfast with his daughter. Behind him, Sarah stirred beneath the covers, blinking sleep from her eyes. "You're leaving already?" she asked, her voice still thick with dreams. Derek turned the corners of his mouth, lifting in a soft smile. "Meetings in New York. I want to be on the ground by noon." Sarah sat up, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "This merger's been eating your hours, Derek." "Even for you, I know," he said gently, walking over to press a kiss to her forehead. "But this is the last trip. After tomorrow, the board signs. Orion takes control of the airline, and I can finally shift from building it to fixing it." Downstairs, the scent of fresh waffles drifted from the kitchen. 8-year-old Lily Patterson stood on her step stool, pouring batter into the iron with the determined focus of a junior engineer. Her curly hair bounced as she looked over her shoulder and saw her father appear in the doorway. "Daddy?" she squealed, jumping down and running to him. Derek caught her midair, lifting her up as she wrapped her arms tightly around his neck. "You sure you have to go?" she asked, peering into his face with soulful eyes. "Just a few days, princess. And when I get back—" He paused. "Everything's going to be better." Lily squinted. "Better. Much better," he whispered, tapping her nose. "There's some grown-up stuff I need to fix." She didn't fully understand, but she nodded anyway, trusting him the way only a child could. The three of them sat down together at the breakfast table. Sarah poured coffee into Derek's favorite mug, the one with the inscription, "I build what they said couldn't be built." A Father's Day gift from Lily 2 years ago. Derek sipped slowly, savoring both the warmth and the rare stillness. "Will Harper meet you at JFK?" Sarah asked. "She's already 2 steps ahead," Derek said with a smirk. "Legal's prepping final contracts, and Skypulse is synced to my tablet. If anything goes sideways, I'll know before the flight. Hits cruising altitude." "You've thought of everything I have to," he said, lowering his voice. "We're not just buying an airline. We're inheriting a culture, one that's been allowed to rot beneath glossy PR and fake smiles." "I need to see it raw before I clean house," Sarah nodded solemnly. "Just promise me something. Anything, don't come back with more scars." There was a silence between them that said more than words could carry. Derek wasn't just a businessman. He was a black man in a boardroom built by people who never expected someone like him to lead it. And while he wore the title of CEO with grace, it came at a cost few could see. Outside, the limo pulled into the circular driveway. The driver, Ted, stepped out and opened the rear door with practiced ease. Derek glanced at his watch, 6:05 a.m. time. He stood lifting his bag and leaning down to kiss Sarah again. Then he knelt beside Lily, whispering, "Keep Mom company, and don't eat all the waffles." She giggled and held out her pinky. "Promise?" He linked his with hers. "Promise." At the door, his phone buzzed. "Harper Williams, car waiting." JFK confirmed. "You're scheduled to fly flight UA4428, Terminal 4, seat 2A, window side." Derek, perfect. "Also keep an eye on that crew manifest. I want full behavioral reports from prior flights. We're not just watching, we're auditing Harper." "Already compiling." "See you at the hotel." The limo door shut behind him with a quiet thunk. As the vehicle rolled down the quiet suburban street, Derek stared out the window, watching the trees pass by like static on a screen. The world saw a tech mogul with a $2,003 billion valuation. But right now he was just a father, a husband, a black man about to walk into an industry that had always smiled to his face while whispering behind his back. And if this was going to be the final test before the takeover, he planned to pass it silently by letting the system indict itself. The limo glided onto the expressway, the morning sky still a pale slate. Inside the car, Derek Patterson sat with his back straight, his tablet already open on his lap. As New York City inched closer, his attention was miles ahead, scanning contracts, revising the final speech, and monitoring internal systems through the SkyPulse interface. While others traveled, Derek calculated. Every detail mattered. This wasn't just a business trip. It was the final pass through the gates before taking control of an empire built by old money for old names. And he wasn't just acquiring an airline. He was inheriting its rot. Harper Williams, his assistant of 3 years, was already online. She had a reputation in the tech world, precise, unshakable, and fluent in the language of urgency. A soft ping sounded from his tablet. Harper confirmed, all FS Air Board members will be present tomorrow at 9:00 a.m. Grand Horizon Hotel, penthouse level. Final contracts already reviewed by legal NDA envelopes printed for internal crew briefing. Derek Goodad, one more check. I want the full crew manifest for flight UA1428. Pull all past passenger complaints, especially anything marked unresolved or low priority. Harper, already running it through the internal archive filters. Early findings, Claudia Reynolds, lead FA, has 3 flagged incidents in the past 14 months. None escalated. Derek stared at the name for a long moment. Claudia? It was always someone like Claudia Smiles in public contempt in private. The kind who thought a pressed uniform excused casual cruelty. Derek. Mark her watch cabin, cam logs, activate record. Feed on takeoff, Harper done. Outside the car moved swiftly past bridges and toll gates. Derek briefly glanced up at the skyline in the distance, its silhouettes catching the first shimmer of morning light. Every tower held a memory for him. Negotiations, betrayals, breakthroughs. But this merger, this would eclipse them all. He swiped through the SkyPulse app, pulling up the interface built specifically for executive travel oversight. The screen shimmered with live airline data, crew rosters, maintenance logs, cabin service protocols, onboard Wi-Fi surveillance summaries, a digital nerve system connecting him to every bolt in the aircraft. One more ping. Harper, your seat is 2A, first class, window side. Cabin layout uploaded. Claudia assigned to first class galley boarding, begins at 7:50. Derek copied dispatch. Final compliance packet to PR. I want 2 versions, one for internal audit, one for external media. Timestamp them. Harper on it. The car slowed as it turned into the departure lane of JFK Terminal 4. The airport hummed with kinetic energy. Suitcase wheels, idle chatter, children squealing, gate announcements echoing through high ceilings. Derek absorbed it all quietly as always. The driver Ted circled to the curb and stepped out, already opening the door with a practiced bow. Terminal 4, Mr. Patterson. First class check-in is straight ahead. Derek stepped out into the crisp autumn air, his carry-on in hand. He adjusted his jacket slightly. Not a suit today, but a deliberate uniform of understatement. Gray hoodie, designer denim, matte sneakers that cost more than some economy tickets. A statement of quiet power, not ostentation. In tech, he had learned long ago, let them underestimate you. It only made the reveal more potent. Inside the terminal, his path was smooth, or at least it should have been. He approached the first-class check-in counter, platinum tag clearly affixed to his luggage. The woman behind the counter had cropped blonde hair, a tight bun, and a tighter smile. Her eyes flicked from his face to his outfit. Pause flickered again. Coach line is to your left, sir, she said, not unkindly, but with that particular edge, the one that said, you don't belong here, do you? Derek met her gaze without a shift in tone. I'm flying first class, platinum status. He placed his documents on the counter. Boarding pass ID, frequent flyer card. She hesitated, took them, and typed mechanically. Her brows lifted as the screen confirmed what her bias couldn't compute. Yes, first class seat 2A, she murmured. He thanked her with a polite nod, accepting his documents and walking away. No sarcasm, no escalation. He simply logged it away. First flag, security was more the same. The TSA agent waved him aside for a random swab while white businessmen in loafers rolled through unchecked. He complied without complaint, holding out his palms. The swab came back clean. Of course it did. Second flag. Inside the terminal, Derek paused at a customer service desk offering champagne samples to select premium travelers. The attendant poured generously for three suited men in line ahead of him. But when he approached, she straightened abruptly and turned away, pretending to check a clipboard. No offer? He didn't ask. He didn't need to. Third flag. He headed to gate 43, glancing briefly at a child waving at a plane through the glass. The innocence was refreshing. Untouched by status, by race, by assumptions, Derek sat down, powered on his tablet again, and opened his notes. Final edits for the merger pitch. Legal arguments, FAA regulation citations, PR response, trees. It was all there. Flight UA1428 would board in 17 minutes, and with it, the quiet storm would begin. The boarding gate was open now. A voice crackled through the overhead speaker. Now welcoming our first-class passengers and Platinum Elite members. Please proceed to the gate at this time. Derek rose from his seat, tucking his tablet back into his carry-on. With slow, deliberate steps, he joined the brief line reserved for premium boarding. Behind him, a murmur of economy passengers gathered, glancing ahead, some with admiration, others with dismissiveness, still others with that strange gaze reserved for the unexpected. He handed his boarding pass to the gate agent, a young man with a cheery tone that faltered slightly when his eyes landed on Derek. The smile faded for a breath, then reappeared. Seat 2A, the agent said, scanning the pass and waving him forward. Enjoy your flight, sir. Derek gave a nod and stepped onto the jet bridge, his footsteps echoing faintly on the industrial flooring. The door to the plane yawned open ahead, and with it came the familiar scent of stale air freshener, recycled cabin oxygen, and steel-framed luxury. He entered. The cabin was pristine leather seats in a soft cream hue, overhead lighting designed to mimic ambient daylight, and attendants already moving briskly in professional choreography. First class was nearly empty at this hour. Only a few passengers had boarded early. Derek turned towards seat 2A, first row window side, and began to stow his bag in the overhead compartment. That's when he felt it. A pause in motion, a silence that wasn't audible but visual. Claudia Reynolds stood 5 feet away, the lead flight attendant. Her uniform was immaculate, her posture rigid. Her eyes lingered on Derek longer than necessary, scanning his clothes, his posture, his skin. She turned to the tall male flight attendant beside her. Lars, his name tag read, and whispered something under her breath. But whispers travel differently in a hushed cabin. He's in the wrong cabin, Claudia muttered. Derek didn't flinch. He simply continued placing his luggage above his seat, then settled in, folding his coat carefully onto the side armrest. A breath calm. Claudia approached. Her professional smile reappeared barely. Would you like champagne or orange juice, sir? She asked, voice neutral. Still water, please. She nodded and walked away. Lars lingered a half-second longer, then followed. Derek looked out the window. It had begun. Passengers began to trickle in. A businessman in a red tie, woman in heels clicking quickly to row 3. An older man in a linen jacket who glanced briefly at Derek with evident surprise and looked again, as if recalibrating an assumption. From behind, a voice said it plainly, not softly enough. Guess they'll let anyone up here these days. It wasn't shouted, it didn't need to be. It was the kind of remark designed to land like a dart, sharp, dismissive, and meant to go unanswered. Derek didn't turn. He didn't respond, but his hand moved to his inner jacket pocket where his phone buzzed gently. Harper Gatecam picked up Claudia whispering at entry. Audio unclear. Recommend live capture on cabin feed. Derek already activated seat 2A. I'll give you real-time notes. He put the phone away and turned his attention to his tablet once more. A few seats away, a young blonde woman in business casual attire, mid-30s perhaps, watched him curiously. She offered a polite smile. Derek returned it with a subtle nod, then went back to reading. But Claudia didn't forget him. As she made her way through the cabin, she offered towels, menus, and pre-flight cocktails to every passenger. Except him. Each time she neared row 2, she pivoted slightly, as if her service loop somehow didn't include seat 2A. The male flight attendant Lars passed Derek twice without eye contact. The energy between them was taut. Something unspoken, something unsettled. Another passenger boarded, then another. The cabin filled slowly. More glances, some curious, others. speculative whispers, chuckles. One person pointed at Derek's shoes designer limited edition. Probably a rapper, someone muttered behind a hand. Derek didn't react, but he noted the comment mentally. Then the meal cards began to circulate, except to him. Instead, Claudia returned with a tray. Upon it sat a single plate with one slice of dry bread, and beside it a clear plastic cup of water. She placed it on his tray table with a mechanical smile. "Here you go," she said softly but with unmistakable tone. "This meal fits you." Silence rippled through the row. The woman across the aisle turned sharply. Her brow furrowed. Her gaze flicked from Derek to Claudia and back. Derek stared at the plate for a long moment. Then he looked up, locking eyes with Claudia. "Is this the standard first-class meal?" he asked, voice calm. She shrugged. "We ran out of options." A lie. Obvious. Derek didn't raise his voice. Instead, he reached slowly for his phone and took a picture. The bread, the water, her name tag. He sent it with 2 words, "Start recording." Emily Watson hadn't planned to say anything. She was a journalist, not a protester, an observer, not a participant. But the moment Claudia placed that insulting tray in front of the black man across the aisle and uttered the words, "This meal fits you," a fuse lit inside her. Her jaw had tensed, her hand instinctively clutched the armrest. She'd seen discrimination before. Subtle ones, codified ones. Hidden beneath corporate policy and public smiles. But this wasn't hidden. This was deliberate, public degrading. She straightened up in her seat. "Excuse me," she said loudly enough to draw attention from the rows nearby. Claudia, still holding the now empty tray, turned her head with a rehearsed smile. "Yes, miss. Could I see the menu?" "Please?" Emily asked. Her tone was polite but razor-edged. Claudia's smile flickered, but she nodded. "Of course." She returned moments later with a laminated card listing the meal options for first-class passengers. Filet mignon with truffle potatoes, seared salmon with lemon caper sauce, and a vegetarian risotto. Emily skimmed the list, then looked back at Claudia, her voice rising just enough to be heard by others. "Why didn't he receive this?" She tilted her head slightly toward Derek. Claudia hesitated. Her eyes darted toward Derek, then back to Emily. Her smile tightened. "Some people," she said carefully, "don't seem like they'd care for fine dining." The comment landed like a slap. Gasps came from 2 rows behind. One man stopped mid-sip of his scotch. A woman at the far end leaned forward. Emily's voice was sharp now, disbelief sharpening every syllable. "Excuse me, I'll check if we have anything available," Claudia added quickly and walked off, across the aisle. Derek gave Emily a small nod. "Thank you," he said softly. She extended a hand. Emily Watson, Derek Patterson. Their handshake was brief but meaningful. Emily hesitated, then leaned slightly forward. "I'm sorry you're dealing with this," she whispered. Derek smiled faintly. "Unfortunately, it's not new. But this isn't going unnoticed." He glanced down at his phone. A reply from Harper had just come in. "Received. Security teams are monitoring. Continue documenting." As Claudia retreated into the galley, visibly shaken, Derek opened his camera again. He slowly panned the cabin, capturing not just the bread and water, but the reactions of those around him. Some looked away, others looked confused, but a few like Emily looked furious. Moments later, Claudia returned to Emily's row with a porcelain plate bearing filet mignon, grilled vegetables, and a flute of chilled champagne. "Your meal, miss," she said, her voice sugary. "Sweet." Emily didn't even glance at the food. Her eyes stayed on Claudia. "Actually," she said, "I'd like to know why this gentleman hasn't been offered the same options." Claudia's tone cooled immediately. "As I said, we ran out of some choices." Emily didn't let up. "Really, because I just saw you serve the same thing to 3 other passengers, and you didn't offer him anything? Not even the menu?" A pause. "I'll check again," Claudia said tightly, and vanished. Emily turned back to Derek. "I can't believe this is happening in first class." "You'd be surprised," Derek replied calmly. "Discrimination doesn't care about zip codes or seat numbers." Emily's face twisted into a frown. "She's going to pretend like this never happened." "No," Derek said, pulling up a secure folder on his tablet. "She's going to learn it happened. On record." Just then another man leaned in from the row ahead, silver hair, navy blazer, eyes narrowed behind thin gold glasses. "Excuse me," he said to Derek, "I couldn't help but overhear." "What do you do, young man?" The young man struck hard. The tone, the assumption, the ranking. As though Derek's value hinged on proving he belonged. "I run a tech company," Derek answered simply. The man scoffed. "Ah, a startup then cute." He extended a hand. "Charles Kessler, Eastland Banking. Derek didn't shake it, just nodded politely. Derek Patterson? Kessler didn't recognize the name. Not yet. From the galley, the soft clink of china and cutlery continued. Claudia hadn't returned, but Emily leaned in again. Do you mind if I document this? Derek met her eyes. I'm a journalist, she said, and what I'm seeing, it's bigger than one bad flight. It's a pattern, not yet, Derek replied. Let them finish digging. Emily understood immediately. Let them bury themselves deeper. Across the cabin, several more passengers were murmuring now. The air had shifted, no longer just quiet judgment or ignored tension. Now awareness, growing stirring. Witnesses were awakening. Emily opened her phone and began writing notes. Derek leaned back in his seat. They weren't alone anymore. The plane had leveled off at cruising altitude. The seatbelt sign dimmed with a soft chime, and the cabin lights brightened in warm amber hues. First-class passengers shifted in their seats, conversations resumed, and champagne flutes clinked gently against the hum of the engines. But in seat 2A, Derek Patterson sat silently, his back straight, his tablet dimmed, his focus absolute. He wasn't watching the in-flight entertainment. He was waiting to see what form the next insult would take. It came 5 minutes later. Claudia approached his row with a tray in her hands, her gait stiff, her smile carefully constructed, but the gleam in her eyes had changed harder now, defensive. As she stopped beside him, several passengers nearby instinctively glanced over, sensing the moment thickening. She placed the tray on his fold-out table. One clear plastic cup of lukewarm water. One slice of bread, dry, no butter, no garnish, no napkin, no menu, no choice. This meal fits you, Claudia said smoothly. She said it without a flinch, as though she were offering caviar and not humiliation. A beat of silence followed, and then stillness. No one spoke. No one moved. Across the aisle, Emily looked up in stunned disbelief. A man 2 rows back coughed awkwardly. A woman shifted in her seat and stared out the window as though trying to pretend she hadn't heard. But Derek had heard. So had every witness. He looked down at the bread, then back up at Claudia. Is this the standard first-class meal? He asked evenly. His voice was calm, frighteningly so. Not a tremor, not a raised eyebrow. Claudia shrugged. We ran out of options. She didn't even pretend to check. Without a word, Derek pulled out his phone and took a photo. The bread, the water, the name tag pinned to Claudia's pressed uniform. Click. Documented, Claudia watched. Her smirk faltered just a little. Photography of crew members is discouraged, she said stiffly. Derek said nothing. His fingers moved quickly over the screen. He opened his secure messaging app and attached the photos. One line of text, make sure you're watching this flight. He hit send. The message went to Harper across the aisle. Emily leaned forward, her voice low but fierce. That was completely inappropriate. Derek nodded, not breaking eye contact with the tray. Thank you for noticing. The contrast between his tone and the seething humiliation of the moment was jarring. Another passenger, a man in his early 60s dressed in tailored navy slacks and an Oxford shirt, peered over from his seat and said too loudly, "What is this, some kind of dietary request?" Derek ignored him. Claudia walked away without apology, and Derek remained still. A few minutes later, Claudia reappeared with a tray of silver-domed entrees. She served the filet mignon to the man, 3 rows ahead, then the salmon to a woman wearing Chanel. Then she returned to Emily with a porcelain plate of roasted vegetables and risotto, accompanied by a flute of champagne. Your meal, Miss Claudia said with forced brightness. Emily didn't smile. She accepted the tray with a clipped, thank you. Her eyes flicking to Derek, then back to Claudia. Actually, she said aloud, her voice clear enough to carry. Why hasn't the gentleman across from me been offered the same? Claudia froze. Several passengers turned their heads. I've already addressed it, Claudia said through gritted teeth. No, you haven't, Emily replied, her tone sharpening. You told him, and I quote, this meal fits you. What did you mean by that? More heads turned. Claudia's eyes darted from face to face. We ran out of options, she repeated. Did you? Emily asked, gesturing to the tray on her own lap. Because this looks freshly plated. Silence. Derek reached for his phone again. Another photo, this time of Emily's meal, across from his bread and water. Time-stamped, geotagged, logged into his encrypted archive. Across the cabin, whispers started spreading. A woman in a navy pantsuit murmured something to her husband. A young man pulled out his phone and discreetly began recording. The tension had breached containment, and Claudia knew it. She turned abruptly and strode back to the galley. But Derek didn't watch her leave. His eyes were on the bread. It sat there, dry, stale, symbolic. Not just of bad service, but of something deeper. A hierarchy, a statement, a judgment passed before a word was spoken. A moment later, his phone buzzed. Harper's security teams engaged, documentation ongoing. Continue as planned. He slid the device back into his pocket. Emily pushed aside her tray and leaned in again. If you're going to do something with this, she said softly, you won't be alone. I never am, Derek replied. Across the aisle, a flight attendant named Lars passed by with a tray of wines. He glanced at Derek, then looked quickly away. He, too, had seen the bread, and the revolution, it had just begun. The tension didn't evaporate, it calcified. In the vacuum of Claudia's retreat, the first-class cabin remained uncomfortably still. Derek sat poised, the untouched bread and water still perched on his tray like relics from a different era. His tablet screen remained black, his posture upright. But everything about him radiated focus like a storm calculating its trajectory. Emily Watson stared at her untouched entree, then at the passengers around her. The silence in the cabin wasn't peace. It was permission, and she wasn't interested in granting it. She unbuckled her seatbelt and stood. The rustle of fabric drew attention. Heads turned. I'm sorry, she began loud enough for at least half the cabin to hear, but I can't sit through this quietly. Her voice was steady, not confrontational, but clear. She wasn't yelling. She didn't need to. She had everyone's attention. That flight attendant just served this gentleman. She pointed toward Derek. A slice of bread and water. No menu, no options, just that. A few passengers shifted uncomfortably. One woman pulled her cardigan closer as though trying to disappear. While the rest of us received full meals and wine, Emily continued. And when I asked why, the response I got was, some people don't seem like they'd care for fine dining. Gasps audible now. One man cursed under his breath. She said that a middle-aged woman near the bulkhead asked, incredulous. Emily nodded. And this isn't about a meal. This is about dignity, about who gets seen and who doesn't. Derek looked up at her. For the first time since the incident, his expression shifted just slightly. Not surprise, not gratitude, recognition. Across the aisle, Charles Kessler, the man in the navy slacks and Oxford shirt, scoffed. I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation. We don't need to blow this out of proportion. Emily turned slowly toward him. Proportion, she echoed. I watched that woman humiliate a paying first-class passenger in front of a cabin full of strangers, and your first instinct is to defend the system. Kessler's face flushed. He glanced at the others, expecting someone to jump to his defense. No one did. Look, he tried again. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. Emily cut him off. The misunderstanding, she said firmly, is thinking silence is neutral. Her words landed like thunder, Lars. The male flight attendant emerged from the galley, clearly summoned by the commotion. His expression was wary, eyes darting between passengers. He approached Emily first, his voice low. Ma'am, I need to ask you to return to your seat. We're trying to maintain a calm cabin environment. Then maintain it, she snapped him. With professionalism and decency, she gestured toward Derek. Start by treating all your first-class passengers like they belong here. Lars opened his mouth, but Emily didn't wait. She sat back down and crossed her arms. Lars turned to Derek. Would you like something else, sir? Derek tilted his head slightly. Now that it's a public relations risk, no. Thank you. It wasn't a snide remark. It was a fact stated with surgical precision. Lars nodded, visibly uncomfortable, then retreated toward the galley. As he passed Claudia near the curtain, they whispered urgently. From where Derek sat, he could hear fragments. She's recording, posting everything. You need to fix this. But there was no fixing what had already ignited. Passengers were talking. Phones were being lifted discreetly, recording. Derek didn't stop them. He didn't encourage them either. He simply allowed the reality to unfold. Across the cabin, a young man with tortoiseshell glasses leaned over the aisle. I'm sorry, he said, looking at Derek. That shouldn't have happened. Derek nodded slightly. It does, more than you think. Emily picked up her phone. She wasn't scrolling. She was writing. Derek watched her thumbs move quick. Deliberate, a journalist's cadence, she looked up. I'm publishing a feature. Discrimination at 40,000 feet. Would you? Derek raised a hand, gently stopping her. Not yet. She nodded in understanding. When you're ready, the captain's voice crackled over the intercom, announcing weather updates and expected turbulence. His tone, artificially warm, now sounded hollow to the passengers who had just witnessed what had transpired. Derek took a deep breath, his phone buzzed in his pocket. Harper feeds are secure, cabin audio backed up, HR logs being reviewed. Also, Claudia Reynolds at Wolf's 3 prior complaints, Hollins 02, reprimands all buried. Your call when to surface it, Derek typed back just one word. Soon, the witnesses had spoken. The evidence was rolling. The pressure in the cabin wasn't just from altitude anymore. It was reckoning. And they were just passing through the cloud layer from 36,000 feet above the Atlanta. Justice didn't look like a gavel. It looked like code. Derek sat motionless, the hum of the engines blending into the undercurrent of shifting tensions around him. The bread and water still rested untouched, a silent monument to humiliation. But Derek no longer focused on it. His attention was elsewhere inside the encrypted tablet, resting on his lap. He opened the SkyPulse interface. No logo, no welcome screen, just a clean white background with a blinking cursor asking for identity confirmation. Fingerprint face scan, then a string of characters, one-time rotating code generated by Harper every hour. Access granted. The dashboard loaded instantly. Dozens of tabs, surveillance feeds, service logs, employee reports. Internal comms threads from the flight crew's tablets. Every action and message transmitted on the aircraft, all flowing through OrionJet's proprietary monitoring framework. Harper had designed the entire system to be undetectable. Derek had insisted on it. It wasn't just quality control, it was insurance against systemic rot. He opened the flight-specific service audit, flight UA1428, JFK bound. Right at the top, Reynolds Claudia, lead cabin crew Wilson Lars, attendant 2, Hollins James captain. All three names flagged. Claudia's log entries were already suspicious. No meals recorded for seat 2A, no beverage service noted, no towel or amenity line items checked. It was as if Derek Patterson, passenger 2A, hadn't existed. Until now, he toggled over to crew tablet communications. And there it was. Claudia, from 18. Coach guy is still waiting for a real meal, ours, 14 to 19. Maybe he's used to basic service, LOL. Claudia, 1420. Fits his outfit. Time-stamped, synced to passenger service logs. Geo-marked below it, another chat thread. Claudia, 1453. Should I just give him the dry slice? No one cares. Lars, 1454. Yeah, do it before we hit beverage service. Derek's lips parted slightly. No smile, no shock, just confirmation. He toggled to another tab, complaint history. Claudia had 3 prior reports of biased service in the past 12 months. One from a Black executive, another from a South Asian family, and one from a disabled veteran who had not been offered boarding assistance. Each case marked insufficient evidence. No further action. Case closed. Hollins, the captain, wasn't exempt. Derek scanned through HR logs. Hollins had been formally reprimanded twice, once for comments about a Muslim passenger's attire, and another for bypassing a Black female first officer for cockpit communication, preferring to speak through the male co-pilot. Swept under the rug. Until now, Derek tapped the secure forward icon. Every log image and timestamped conversation was compressed into a data bundle and transmitted encrypted to Harper's legal review team. Within seconds, a message appeared. Harper received. This is deeper than just Claudia. We're mapping crew behavior patterns fleet-wide. Also, a passenger just posted a clip of her. This meal fits you comment. It's at 75K views and rising. Hashtag bread is not service now trending. Derek blinked once. The revolution had begun. Not with fire, with fiber optics, the woman across the aisle. Emily was typing quickly on her phone again. She looked up, catching Derek's glance. She didn't smile, just nodded once. A silent confirmation that more eyes were opening. Another alert flashed. Vanessa Mitchell, Chief of Security, OrionJet. Per your instruction, we've positioned agents at JFK. Gate 37 escort. Ready crew will be detained for debrief immediately upon landing. Derek replied, prepare private conference room. Make it visible to airline execs. Another message chimed in from Harper. Also, PR draft ready, pending your review. Legal preparing notice for immediate terminations if you the go. Derek didn't respond yet. Timing mattered. He wasn't here for vengeance. He was here for systems, and those don't collapse under emotion. They collapse under evidence. He closed the tablet and tucked it into his leather briefcase. The weight of the cabin shifted again. Turbulence, but minor. Claudia reappeared in the aisle. This time she approached with a plate, a full tray, filet mignon, roasted potatoes, and red wine. Her voice was syrupy. "Mr. Patterson, we found another meal after all, Ma. Derek didn't touch the tray. "Don't rewrite the story," he said evenly. The passengers nearby froze. Claudia's face twitched. "This isn't about the meal," he added softly. "It's about the mirror." Claudia hesitated, then lowered the tray, unsure whether to set it down or walk away. Derek spared her the choice. He turned to look out the window. Moments later, the plate was gone. Another alert. Harper pressed, picking up the story. "We recommend delaying the statement until after disembark. Let them dig deeper." Derek typed back, "Agreed, let them show more of themselves." He took one final look at the untouched bread and water. Then very deliberately, he slid his phone forward and snapped a photo. No caption, just documentation, just truth. And truth was catching altitude. Captain James Hollins adjusted the throttle slightly, his gloved fingers steady on the control yoke as the aircraft cruised over Pennsylvania. The cabin had settled into a deceptive calm. Passengers were dozing off, screens flickered with movies, and the soft clink of silverware from the first-class galley punctuated the silence. But inside the cockpit, things were far from peaceful. The message had come through 5 minutes ago. Discreet but unmistakable, passenger 2A Derek L. Patterson, CEO of Orion Jet Technologies, principal stakeholder, impending merger. The screen pulsed once with the name before going dark again. Hollins didn't move for a moment, then he swore under his breath. He had heard rumors about Orion's CEO flying incognito on random flights. Quality audits, they said, testing the integrity of the cabin crews, observing everything like a ghost in the machine. He never thought it would be his flight. And worse, Claudia had just served the man a plate of dry bread and water. "Damn it," Hollins muttered, his co-pilot. Frank Wilson glanced over. "Everything okay, Captain?" "No," Hollins replied flatly. "We've got a situation." Wilson leaned in. "Wait, don't tell me it's about that guy in 2A. Hollins nodded grimly. "Claudia said something earlier about how he didn't look like first class. I thought she was being dramatic. She was being stupid." Hollins snapped. "We should have pulled him before takeoff," Wilson frowned. "Pulled him," Hollins didn't answer. His jaw was clenched. Another message buzzed through the internal system, this one from Claudia James. "He's him, Patterson, CEO tech guy. We are so effed." The captain rubbed his forehead. He'd survived 2 labor disputes, 1 mid-air mechanical failure, and a pilot strike. But this was different. This wasn't turbulence. It was an implosion, a controlled, calculated one, orchestrated by the very man they had underestimated. Back in the cabin, Claudia stumbled down the aisle, pale and visibly rattled. She stopped at Derek's seat again, this time without the performative smile. "Mr. Patterson," she began, "I just want to say I truly didn't know." Derek raised a hand gently to stop her. He didn't raise his voice. "That's exactly the problem," he said quietly. Claudia stood frozen for a moment before backing away, wordless. 2 rows back, Emily watched it all unfold, her phone discreetly recording. Her journalist instincts buzzed. This wasn't just a customer service failure. It was a system unraveling in real time. Passengers began to stir. Whispers passed from row to row. "Is he someone important? I heard he owns the airline. I think she served him. Bread." The tension spread like a gas leak, silent, invisible, explosive. Derek stayed composed, watching it unfold. He wasn't celebrating. He wasn't gloating. He was measuring. Recording a message from Harper appeared on his tablet. "Cabin feed confirms crew discussing deletion of service logs. Hollins has instructed Claudia to keep you happy until landing. Forwarding all audio to legal." Derek typed back, "Let them keep digging. Capture everything." In the galley, Lars paced nervously, sweat pooling at his collar. He'd tried to stay out of it, tried to be invisible, but now the ship was sinking and everyone was watching. He glanced at Claudia, who was whispering furiously into her crew tablet. "Delete the damn entry," she hissed. "He's got no proof. If the log doesn't show it—" Lars hesitated. "That's fraud, Claudia. If he's really who you say he is, just do it," she snapped. But Lars didn't move. Instead, he pulled out his personal phone and quietly forwarded a copy of the unaltered log to an email address Harper had created just for situations like this. At the front of the plane, Captain Hollins emerged from the cockpit, his uniform crisp expression neutral, but the tension in his shoulders betrayed him. He approached Derek's seat, forcing a tight-lipped smile. "Mr. Patterson," he said on behalf of the crew, "I want to apologize if your experience has been anything less than satisfactory today. We take feedback seriously," and Derek looked up slowly. "I'm sure you do," he said. "Once you know who's giving it," the captain's face twitched, but he said nothing more. With a quick nod, he returned to the cockpit. Emily leaned over again. "You planned this," she whispered. Derek didn't respond. He didn't have to. Behind them, passengers now openly speculated. "Did you see the staff change their tone? He's recording everything." They're in trouble. The plane cut through another cloud layer as they began initial descent into JFK. Outside the window, the city lights flickered like static. But inside the cabin, all eyes were on one man. Not because he was loud, not because he fought, but because he had stayed still long enough for the entire system to unravel around him. Another message lit up Derek's tablet. "Vanessa Mitchell, head of security. We are positioned. Security teams ready for crew extraction upon landing. Your car is waiting at gate 37 PR and legal standing by." Derek closed the tablet and straightened in his seat. Claudia passed one last time, her hands trembling, as she set down a tray of chocolate mousse. "We wanted to offer something special before landing," she mumbled. Derek didn't even look at it. He simply whispered, "Too late." The lights dimmed, the cabin hushed, but the silence wasn't peace, it was anticipation for justice. As the aircraft leveled out after its initial descent, the tension inside the first-class cabin wasn't just palpable, it was surgical. No more sarcasm, no more whispers, just a thick, clinical silence as the crew scrambled to maintain a crumbling facade. Derek Patterson sat still in seat 2A, his posture relaxed but his presence now magnetic. The same passengers who'd once side-eyed his hoodie and silent demeanor now watched with wary reverence. They didn't know exactly who he was, but they knew enough. He was dangerous, not by volume, by precision. By now, Harper's updates came every 60 seconds. Recording synced, cabin logs secured, feed from crew. Only chat, intercepted. Reynolds tried to delete a timestamp. Blocked security. Flagged 5 microaggression incidents from voice tone analysis alone. Derek didn't smile. Not yet. He tapped his tablet once, no password prompt required. A blue screen pulsed, softly displaying the Orion Jet internal interface. SkyPulse. The app wasn't available on any app store. It had been custom-built in-house for one reason only, to measure human decency at 30,000 feet. Derek navigated seamlessly, eyes flicking through dashboards. Opined audio live transcription. Claudia's voice detected 14 times using discriminatory language, including, "He doesn't look like he'd care for fine dining." Crew behavior logs. Claudia's entire 3-year service history showed 6 informal complaints, 2 formal HR reports, all marked resolved with coaching. Service disparity, mapping. 97% of white passengers in first class received standard meals and champagne. Derek, the only black passenger, received neither. It was an ecosystem of bias now laid bare in data, not emotion. Orion Jet didn't just build operational software, it built ethical diagnostics. Because systems didn't fail, they behaved exactly as they were designed to. From the corner of his eye, Derek watched as Claudia frantically returned to the galley, huddling with Lars. He could guess the conversation. "What do we do now?" "You do nothing," he whispered to himself. "Let them dig the hole deeper." Meanwhile, Emily sat across the aisle stunned. She wasn't recording anymore. She didn't need to. This wasn't a story of isolated cruelty. It was the quiet unveiling of a technological reckoning. A man using code, not chaos, to change the world. Emily leaned over. "Is that live feed?" Derek turned the tablet slightly. She gasped. Lines of text flowed across the screen. Real-time analytics audio. Transcriptions, crew behavior patterns. "This is bigger than I thought," she whispered. Derek nodded. They thought they were mocking a passenger. Emily met his eyes, but they were auditioning for the person who owns their future. Down the aisle, Claudia began to notice the eyes watching. Her, not just Derek's, not just Emily's. Everyone's. She turned back to the galley, heart racing, and typed into her crew device. "Hollins, I think he has access to everything, cabin logs, chats. What do we do?" Back in the cockpit, Captain Hollins received the message. Sweat beaded on his temples. He hadn't flown blind in 30 years, but this was different. He glanced at his own screen. Crew log, passenger manifests. All systems normal, but he knew they weren't his systems anymore. They were Orion's. "Derek's, Frank," he said to his co-pilot. If anyone asks, we treated every passenger equally. Frank Wilson didn't respond. The silence spoke louder than agreement. Another update flashed on Derek's tablet. Vanessa JFK confirms. Security positioned at Gate 37 VIP extraction route. Clear legal team in hangar. Your signal will initiate next protocol. Derek tapped a command key. The screen changed, showing live feeds from cabin cams. One showed Claudia speaking to a fellow flight attendant, Lars nervously shifting in place. The other showed the overhead view of the first-class galley, empty now. But earlier, it had recorded everything. Every word, every laugh, every refusal. From bread and water to this. Derek switched feeds again to an encrypted dashboard marked crew-level incident profiles active flight UA 1428. Reynolds Claudia, rank senior FA, status under review. Hollins James, rank captain, status under review. Wilson Lars, rank junior FA, status pending testimony. Derek paused Lars. He remembered the half apology, the discomfort, the hesitation. Maybe that meant something. He tapped into the log Lars had sent earlier, the unedited service log. It matched Harper's team's record perfectly. Derek bookmarked it. Outside, the city lights of New York glittered like circuit boards across the nightscape. The jet's slow descent aligned with runway 4L. Back inside, Claudia approached again this time, holding out a carefully plated dessert. "Mr. Patterson," she said, voice trembling, "a final gesture before we land." Derek didn't flinch. He looked at the mousse, the gold leaf on top, the china plate trembling in her hand. He glanced at the dry bread still sitting on his tray, then back at her. "I already ate," he said softly. "Your true colors." Claudia blinked. She understood. The dessert wasn't a gift, it was a confession. The lights dimmed. The seatbelt sign blinked on. In 20 minutes, wheels would touch down. And when they did, Derek wouldn't be stepping off as a disgruntled passenger. He'd be remaking the system from the inside. Derek's fingers moved swiftly across the surface of the tablet as the SkyPulse dashboard came alive. Streams of data cascaded across the screen, real-time diagnostics, staff performance logs, and most importantly, the disciplinary records of everyone on board. He tapped into the flight staff records. Incident flag section. First name on the list, Claudia Reynolds. The number next to her file glared in crimson, 5 filed complaints. Beside it, an automated tag, pattern detected. He opened the file. 5 incidents spanning 18 months. The first, a black passenger had filed a formal complaint claiming Claudia ignored service requests and made condescending comments. The second, a Muslim woman was denied water during Ramadan, with the excuse, "We don't serve personal rituals." The third, an Asian couple in first class was asked to switch seats for a priority flyer despite holding premium status. The final 2 incidents were flagged with insufficient evidence, but contained attached audio clips. Derek pressed play. A recording crackled, Claudia's voice unmistakable. Could be heard mocking a passenger's accent. Another file, laughter followed by, "They should be used to coach service anyway." Her tone wasn't just dismissive. It was institutional arrogance cloaked in a uniform. Derek closed her file, his jaw tightened. Next, Captain James Hollins. The record was longer than Claudia's, and arguably more damning, 7 incidents. 2 involving inappropriate comments about a female co-pilot's emotional overreactions. 1 reprimand for refusing to announce a prayer accommodation for a Sikh passenger, and multiple complaints from Black and Latino ground staff citing hostile tone and discriminatory directives. Every one of them marked resolved internally. Translation swept under the rug. At the bottom of Hollins's report was a chilling annotation. Internal correspondence suggests deliberate suppression of pattern to avoid PR incidents. Derek's brow furrowed. This wasn't individual failure, this was corporate rot, sanctioned, normalized, and automated. He toggled SkyPulse into pattern recognition mode, an Orion Jet proprietary AI built for parsing complex behavioral data across fleet personnel. Within seconds, the system generated a heat map. 32 related incidents involving Claudia or Hollins, most of them during domestic flights, a majority aimed at passengers of color. Nearly all dismissed, yet through algorithmic triangulation, SkyPulse had identified a statistical bias footprint. Derek smiled grimly. Tech never lied. Not when you owned it. He forwarded the entire packet to Harper with one command. Escalate to legal and PR, use Tier 1 protocol. This is systemic. Her reply came instantly, confirmed. Preparing multi-agency release. That word systemic was a nuclear trigger in the world of corporate accountability. It meant no one could scapegoat. No one could plead ignorance. He opened the live camera feed from the cabin. In full HD clarity, he watched Claudia breeze past his seat, warm towel in hand for a white couple while ignoring his row altogether. He tagged the timestamp. Then a moment later, the feed showed her glancing nervously at her tablet, typing something. Derek remembered that moment clearly, the instant when she discovered his name. He switched feeds to the cockpit audio archive. The system had been recording since takeoff, another invisible function of Orion's network architecture. As he scrubbed through, he hit a chilling exchange. Hollins should have taken him off before takeoff. This is going to be a PR nightmare, Parker. You sure it's him, the Orion guy? Hollins, yeah, delete the service logs. Say it was an allergy thing. Clean it up, Derek didn't flinch. He merely forwarded the file to Harper with a two-word note. Tampering confirmed. Skypulse logged everything, time-stamped, encrypted, unforgeable. In his peripheral vision, Derek could sense the energy of the cabin shifting. Claudia moved slower. Lars kept glancing at Derek, unsure if he should offer service or stay away. Other passengers had begun to sense something was off. They weren't sure what, but the nervousness of the crew was unmistakable. Another ping from Harper PR and legal team synced. This is no longer an internal matter. We're prepping regulatory outreach. Derek tapped a final command, activate auto evidence chain. Every audio, every video feed, every log entry now synced to a private cloud folder marked UA128 incident. Full documentation. It would be ready for litigation, media briefings, or board-level review within hours. He leaned back in his seat, the untouched slice of bread still resting on his tray. It wasn't just a meal anymore. It was Exhibit A. Above him, the plane hummed quietly as it sliced through the stratosphere. Inside, a much quieter transformation was unfolding. The slow, surgical unraveling of a system that had hidden behind polished smiles and polite uniforms for too long. Tension crept like static through the first-class cabin. It was subtle at first, the kind of shift in atmosphere that seasoned travelers recognized but couldn't quite name. A delay in service, a nervous glance from a flight attendant, the sound of whispers behind curtains meant to be soundproof. Something was off. Emily Watson felt it immediately. Her instincts, honed by years in journalism, prickled with anticipation. She had already noticed the disparity in service, the performative attentiveness offered to passengers in polished suits, the calculated coldness reserved for Derek. But now the energy had changed. It wasn't just exclusion anymore. It was fear, tightly wound and beginning to fray. Across the aisle, Derek remained unreadable. He hadn't touched the bread, hadn't reached for the water. He simply sat still, stylus in hand, navigating a digital web far more powerful than anyone around him understood. Emily watched his face for clues, for the flicker of emotion that might reveal what was unfolding behind the surface. But Derek Patterson was a man practiced in the art of stillness. Meanwhile, Claudia's facade began to show visible cracks. Her smile had thinned into a tight line. She moved with jittery energy, overcompensating with forced politeness to the passengers she had ignored just an hour earlier. Her eyes darted to Derek's seat more than once, as if trying to gauge just how much damage had already been done. Behind her, Lars worked with quiet dread. He had overheard Hollins's conversation with Claudia, the one about getting ahead of this and containing exposure. But Lars had also seen Derek's expression, calm, commanding, impossible to rattle. It wasn't the face of a passenger who planned to lodge a complaint and move on. It was the face of someone orchestrating something bigger. Something final. In seat 3C, Charles Kessler had begun to fidget. He still didn't know Derek's full identity, but the dramatic shift in crew behavior had tipped him off that this wasn't just another tech bro with miles. Something about the way Claudia had paled, the way Lars had retreated, it unsettled him. So like any man accustomed to advantage, Kessler leaned on gossip. "Do you know who he is?" he whispered to the woman beside him, a hedge fund manager from Connecticut. She shrugged. "I think I saw the woman across the aisle filming earlier. Maybe something's going viral." Kessler turned slightly, trying to get a better look at Derek. Still composed, still calm, still untouched, bread. "You think he's famous?" the woman asked. Kessler didn't answer. But his silence said everything. At the rear of the first-class cabin, Claudia ducked behind the service curtain and pulled out her phone. The airline's internal messaging system had been pinging for the past 10 minutes, alerts, flag system, priority overrides. She tapped into the service log and froze. A new entry had appeared, Flight UA128, under review. Incident ID 0049C, initiated by Orion Systems. That wasn't possible. That system was only accessible by corporate-level staff, or her breath caught someone from Orion Jet. Technologies itself, Claudia's fingers trembled as she scrolled. She tapped the user ID linked to the override. One line of text appeared, Authorization D. Patterson, Owner Access. Her world tilted. The room shrank. She burst out from behind the curtain, nearly colliding with Lars. Did you know, she hissed? Know what? That's not just a passenger. That's the CEO of Orion Jet. He's the reason we're being reviewed. Lars blanched. You're sure I just saw the override? He initiated it from his seat, using internal systems. I didn't even know passengers could access. Lars looked past her toward Derek, who was now speaking quietly with Emily. His demeanor hadn't changed. That was what made it worse. Back at Derek's row, Emily leaned forward. They're cracking, she whispered. Whatever you've put in motion, it's working. Derek's response was a small, knowing nod. Let them across the cabin. More passengers had begun to take notice. A mother traveling with her teenage son in seat 1A whispered something and gestured discreetly toward Derek's tray. The son, clearly confused, shrugged. The mother shook her head, her expression laced with unease. Near the bulkhead, a middle-aged man in business attire murmured to his partner, That's not normal. First-class meals don't look like that. The ripples were spreading. Words passed in low tones. Glances stretched longer, and still Derek remained unmoved, the eye of a storm gathering force around him. Then came the final straw. A flight attendant from economy, a young Latina named Sophia, passed through the curtain by mistake and paused when she saw Derek's tray. Her brows furrowed. Excuse me, she said softly to Claudia, who was preparing a champagne refill. Is that his meal? Claudia turned sharply, her voice clipped. Mind your section, Sophia. Sophia's eyes lingered on the bread and water for a beat too long before she nodded and retreated, but not before glancing at Derek. That moment, too, was captured on a nearby passenger's phone. Another whisper, another witness, another thread unraveling. By the time the seatbelt sign chimed on for descent, the cabin wasn't just aware it was simmering. Not with outrage yet, but with quiet, collective unease. Something had happened here, something that would not land quietly. The descent had begun, but altitude wasn't the only thing dropping. Facades were crashing, masks slipping, and reputations spiraling toward the earth faster than the plane itself. Inside the first-class cabin, the ambient buzz of soft conversations and clinking glasses had been replaced by a brittle silence, the kind that felt like the breath before an explosion. Passengers who once averted their eyes from the bread and water now studied it like a headline. Eyes bounced between Derek, the tray in front of him, and the increasingly erratic behavior of the crew. Questions had taken root in the cabin. The answers, it seemed, were about to arrive. Derek felt the shift, not just in cabin pressure, but in power. Claudia had passed his row twice in the last 5 minutes. Not once did she speak. Her hands were shaking. Lars, on the other hand, had stopped trying to maintain appearances. He stood stiffly at the galley door, his face pale, his posture defensive. A man caught between complicity and self-preservation. Then from seat 2D, Charles Kessler broke the tension. I don't care who he is, Kessler said loudly, addressing no one in particular. But this is ridiculous. He's clearly trying to make a scene. Heads turned. Derek didn't flinch. His eyes stayed fixed on the tablet in front of him, a black screen filled with flight data, time-stamped messages, and internal crew logs. His fingers hovered above the screen like a pianist preparing to strike the keys that would set everything in motion. Kessler, emboldened by the attention, leaned forward and addressed Derek directly. You know, back in my day, people earned respect. They didn't demand it by filming everything and crying foul. Derek closed his tablet gently and looked up. Across the aisle, Emily raised her phone, instinctively sensing what was coming. Sir Derek said, his voice calm and steady, You're confusing visibility with confrontation. I didn't demand anything, I observed. I recorded. I waited. Kessler scoffed. You're quoting rules, trying to trap good people doing a tough job. That's when Derek dropped it. You think quoting rules makes me right? He said slowly and clearly. No, but I wrote those codes. Silence, every head turned. Even Claudia, halfway down the aisle, stopped dead in her tracks. What? Kessler blinked. I wrote those codes, Derek repeated. The FAA discrimination protocols. You think I'm misusing. I helped author the policy update in 2022. Section 382, subsection B, paragraph 4. Passenger rights related to equitable service in premium cabins. Emily's mouth parted in awe. Even she hadn't known this. Of course, Derek added, tilting his head slightly. You wouldn't have read them. They weren't designed for you. A ripple of tension cracked the cabin like a dropped glass. Across from him, a young couple exchanged glances. The husband mouthed, "Is he serious?" to his wife. She nodded slowly, eyes never leaving Derek. Claudia recovered first. She stepped forward, her smile more forced than ever. "Mr. Patterson," she began. "If there's been a misunderstanding, there hasn't," Derek said flatly. "I assure you, you assured me earlier that bread and water was the only option. That wasn't true." She opened her mouth, but Derek continued, his voice still calm but with steel behind it now. "You also told another passenger within earshot of multiple witnesses that some people don't seem like they'd care for fine dining." Gasps audible this time. "That statement, along with your behavior, was captured on video by at least 3 passengers, 2 of whom have already posted clips online. The footage is currently trending under the hashtag bread is not service. I suggest you check your phone." Claudia's face turned the color of ash. Derek didn't stop. "Let me be clear," he said, standing now. "This isn't about bad service, it's about systemic rot. And your behavior didn't just embarrass a passenger, it exposed a pattern." Lars stepped forward slightly, voice low. "He's right," Claudia turned shocked. "What are you doing?" "I've been on 7 flights with you," he said, eyes on Derek now. "I've seen how you treat passengers who don't fit your mold. I should have said something sooner." Derek nodded once, not in thanks but in acknowledgement. Kessler tried again. "This is madness. Why didn't you say who you were from the start?" Derek looked him dead in the eye. "Because I don't need to play your game. I own the board." The weight of those words hit differently this time. Now the cabin understood. Now it wasn't just poetic, it was literal. Derek Patterson, founder and CEO of Orion Jet Technologies, architect of the very systems this airline relied on. And as of tomorrow, the controlling stakeholder in the merger that would reshape everything. Claudia backed away slowly. Emily stood slowly applauding. Others followed, not loud, not theatrical, just a few scattered claps. The kind that comes from recognition, not spectacle. Derek didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He simply sat back down, reopened his tablet, and typed a single word to Harper: "Proceed." The silence that followed Derek Patterson's declaration wasn't empty. It was thunderous. A silence dense with unraveling assumptions, failed calculations, and dawning consequences. Claudia stumbled back toward the galley, her mind racing, pulse roaring in her ears. It wasn't just the passengers' shifting gazes or Lars's unexpected defection. It was the look in Derek's eyes, not anger, not vindication, just calm authority, the kind that comes from knowing you're not bluffing. She reached the galley and yanked open the crew tablet cabinet. Her fingers trembled as she tapped the interface, entering her credentials to access the airline's internal personnel and VIP traveler system. The name Patterson Derek L. appeared immediately. Claudia froze. Her heart pounded so hard it felt like it was echoing in her skull. There it was, his corporate headshot, same face, same eyes, except this time flanked by a title: CEO. Orion Jet Technologies lead stakeholder merger acquisition, pending finalization, 51.7%. Control, and then in bold, just beneath that, primary architect, Sky Pulse System cabin recording compliance tracking module. Her knees buckled. She grabbed the counter for support. He didn't just own the boardroom. He had built the software that recorded everything inside this cabin, including her. She whispered aloud without meaning to. "Oh my God." Lars appeared at her shoulder, peeking at the screen. He blanched. "You're kidding me," Claudia barely breathed. "That's him. That's the passenger in 2A. The weight of every petty sneer, every moment she skipped his row, every smirk while pouring champagne for everyone but him. It all crashed back on her in an unbearable flood." Meanwhile, back in the cabin, the dominoes continued to fall. Emily leaned slightly toward Derek. "They know now." He didn't look up from his tablet. "Good. Let's see what they do with the truth." Passengers were beginning to stir. Whispers flowed between seats like electricity through copper wires. The mood had changed, not just respect, but discomfort, because now they weren't just witnesses, they were implicated by their silence. At the rear of first class, a younger flight attendant, barely 25, visibly anxious, slipped into the galley to find Claudia staring into the tablet like it might explode. "Is it true?" she asked quietly. "He's the CEO." Claudia didn't answer. Her mind had already moved from panic to strategy, but her instincts, honed over years of performative professionalism, were scrambling for traction. "I need to fix this," she muttered. "You can't fix this," Lars said. "I have to try." She stormed back into the cabin like nothing had happened, a smile welded to her face. In her hands, a tray with their most premium offering, champagne and crystal caviar, a plated amuse-bouche. She approached Derek's seat and stopped. "Mr. Patterson," she said in a tone of contrived sweetness. "On behalf of our entire crew, please allow me to apologize and offer you no need for theatrics now," Derek said evenly, not looking up. "What's done is done." It wasn't rude. It wasn't aggressive. It was surgical. Her hands trembled. She lowered the tray slightly, lips parting as if to say more, but there was nothing left to say. That wouldn't make it worse. Derek finally looked up. "Tell me, Claudia, did you know who I was before you served me that bread?" She stammered. No, sir, I didn't. And if you had, I would have acted differently." "And that," he said calmly, "is exactly the problem." Her face crumpled. A single tear welled in her right eye, but she caught it before it fell. Still holding the tray, she turned and walked away slower than before toward the galley. Across the aisle, Kessler was watching with a look of morbid fascination. This was no longer entertainment, it was revelation. And for people like him, who built their entire identity on status and access, nothing was more terrifying than being wrong about who held real power. He tried one last time to salvage his ego. "I believe we may have some mutual contacts in banking," he said, leaning toward Derek. Voice oily. "Charles Kessler, Eastland Financial. I'd be delighted to talk further." Once we land, Derek gave a slow, deliberate nod, but not a smile, not an acknowledgement, just a movement that said noted and dismissed. Kessler shrank back into his seat. The cabin crew had now clearly split into factions. Claudia and a few loyalists moved cautiously, their faces pale and their movements robotic. The younger ones, who'd previously stayed silent, began offering Derek small gestures, a refill, a clean towel, anything to distance themselves from the spectacle they'd allowed. But Derek refused them all. He sat in silence, eyes once again on his tablet, reading messages from Harper. Status, media teams already outside JFK. Footage, uploading to internal servers. Security, Vanessa in position, SUVs ready. Derek typed one word. Hold. The storm had been set in motion. There was no need to chase it. He would meet it at the gate. The intercom crackled. "This is your captain speaking. We'll be beginning our final descent into JFK shortly. Please ensure your seatbelts are fastened." Claudia, back in the galley, was frantically composing a message on her own device. An incident report, rewritten history, anything that might soften what was to come. But it was far too late. In row 2A, the man she tried to humiliate had just received a message from legal. "PR statement prepared. Do you want the firings to be public or private?" He didn't reply. Instead, he leaned back in his seat, eyes closed for the first time since boarding, and whispered to himself, "I didn't need to say who I was. I gave them every chance to show who they were." By the time the wheels of the aircraft touched the runway at JFK, the cabin felt more like a courtroom than a first-class luxury experience. Passengers weren't just shifting in their seats. They were recalibrating their posture in relation to power. And for the crew, especially Claudia and Captain Hollins, the descent wasn't just physical. It was reputational. Career-ending. Derek remained seated motionless as the aircraft taxied toward the private executive terminal. He had declined every offering Claudia had made in the past 20 minutes. Champagne, warm towels, deluxe chocolate mousse flown in from Paris. It wasn't that he was angry. He was deliberate, controlled. And for Claudia, that was the most terrifying part. She had no idea what he would do next, only that he held all the cards. Claudia clung to her last shred of composure, walking stiffly through the aisle, placing little extras on tray tables like she could erase the humiliation she'd scripted with hospitality. But Derek's tray still bore the untouched bread and water, a monument to her mistake. A permanent fixture on a flight that had already become legend in every whispered conversation on board. Lars, meanwhile, was silent, still shaken by Derek's cool acknowledgement that silence makes accomplices. But in that silence, something had shifted in him. He had chosen to quietly forward the untouched service log, the real one, not the sanitized version Claudia had urged him to doctor directly to Harper's private inbox. That act wouldn't absolve him, but it might begin a new path. Derek's phone vibrated again, and another message from Harper. Media confirmed #bread is not service trending, internal legal. Ready, waiting on your word. Do you want firings at the gate or in private debrief? He stared at the screen for several seconds, then typed a single phrase. They'll know when the door opens. Back in the galley, Claudia pulled Lars aside again. Get the log. Wipe it now. We can't let that leave the plane. I already sent it, Lars said flatly. Claudia blinked, her lip twitching. You what? I sent the real log to corporate. He didn't say Harper's name. Along with your audio, the jokes, the meal, comment, all of it. You idiot. Her whisper was sharp, venomous. Do you have any idea what you've done? Lars didn't flinch. Yes. For once I do. She turned away, seething. She had no defense left, only hope that groveling might lessen the blow. The captain's voice cut across the cabin once more. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to John F. Kennedy International Airport. Local time is 8:47 p.m. and the temperature is 64 degrees. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened until we reach the gate, and the seatbelt sign has been turned off. On behalf of the crew, we thank you for flying with us today. The irony in the thank you made several passengers exchange glances. Emily Watson had been quietly capturing everything. The initial comment, the shift in tone, the failed redemption attempts. Now seated upright with her phone in airplane mode, she glanced over at Derek. They've got no idea what's waiting on the other side of that door, do they? Derek met her eyes. They're about to. The plane came to a stop, hydraulics hissing softly beneath them. The cabin door hissed, then clicked open. But instead of the usual gate agent or cheerful farewell from the crew, two sharply dressed figures stepped aboard. One was a tall, black woman in a tailored Navy suit, posture, military gaze, laser-focused. Mr. Patterson, she said, voice calm and authoritative. Derek rose smoothly. Vanessa, your car is ready, and the three individuals we spoke of will be joining us for immediate review. The quiet gas that spread through the cabin was visceral. Claudia dropped the tray she had been holding. Champagne splashed across the aisle. Wait, what? What's happening? She sputtered. Vanessa didn't even glance at her. She turned to Lars. You'll come too. Captain Hollins had just emerged from the cockpit, face hardening. I have duties to complete before I leave the aircraft. You've already completed them, Vanessa replied coolly. And if not, your co-pilot can finish the checklist. You're expected for debrief immediately. Hollins looked at Derek for the first time since the beginning of the flight. This is going too far, he muttered. Derek met his gaze. No rage, no vengeance, just business. Too far was when your crew decided bread and water was appropriate for first class, he said. This is just course correction. Emily rose too, grabbing her notepad. Vanessa turned to her. You're with us? Mr. Patterson requested your presence. Passengers whispered louder now. Several lifted their phones, but no one dared speak to Derek. Claudia's legs felt weak as she stepped into the aisle. Hollins followed with grim silence. Lars walked behind them, head held slightly higher, the only one among them who had begun to make peace with his role. As they exited, Derek paused one last time. He turned to the remaining first-class passengers, most of whom were now staring wide-eyed. Their elite self-assurance ruptured. He gestured to the untouched tray. Just remember, he said, his voice steady, that wasn't a meal. That was a mirror. Then he turned, following Vanessa into the jet bridge, toward the black SUVs, toward the waiting cameras, toward a future not yet written, but fully under his control. While Derek walked calmly toward the waiting SUVs, a storm brewed behind him in the cramped, fluorescent-lit galley of the aircraft. Claudia stood hunched over a crew tablet, her breath short, her fingers trembling as she navigated the flight's digital service log. Sweat beaded on her temple. Her carefully practiced poise was unraveling, thread by thread. Lars stood beside her, arms crossed. You're wasting your time, he said. They already have the real log. Claudia didn't answer. Her eyes flicked between timestamps and notes, trying to identify entries that could indict her. She deleted one line. No meal served in 2A. Passenger refused service. Then another crew refused to confirm dietary preference. She scrolled faster. Redacted, scrubbed, edited. Stop it, Lars said again, louder this time. You're not fixing anything, you're just burying yourself deeper. She turned sharply to him. I don't care, I'm not going down without fighting. Claudia, Lars said, voice low now. You don't realize what just happened. You didn't offend a passenger. You provoked a reckoning, but Claudia was past reason. He's just a man, she hissed. He wanted power. Fine, but this is a hit job. Lars looked at her, really looked at her, and realized for the first time that she hadn't understood a single thing. Not the social shift unfolding in real time, not the historic moment she had triggered, not the idea that accountability had finally caught up to her. She thought this was still salvageable. From the flight deck, Captain Hollins had joined them. His weathered face was set in that familiar mix of indifference and irritation, a man who believed protocols existed only to be massaged. "What's the situation?" he asked, glancing over Claudia's shoulder at the tablet. "She's trying to clean up the log," Lars said. Hollins didn't flinch. "Good, do it quickly." "Seriously," Lars said, shocked. "You're condoning this. I'm managing fallout." Hollins growled. "And if you want a future in this industry, I suggest you fall in line." Lars's eyes narrowed. "There is no future if this is how we operate." "Spare me the martyrdom," Hollins snapped. "We've had inspectors, whistleblowers, social media leaks before. They burn hot, then fade. We ride it out. We always do." Lars stepped back. "This isn't a social media leak," he said quietly. "This is Derek Patterson." That name, the way Lars said it, sent a visible ripple through both Hollins and Claudia. They had known his name, yes. Now they were beginning to grasp the depth of his reach. Orion Jet Technologies. Lars continued, "Cabin monitoring software, log, auditing, internal comms, tracking. Every move we've made is probably stored in 4 mirrored servers by now." Hollins looked unsettled for the first time. "You're guessing?" "No," Lars said. "I'm remembering the system orientation we blew off when the new tablets were installed. Remember the SkyPulse app? He built that." Claudia's fingers stilled. Suddenly, every whisper, every smirk, every skipped service, it wasn't hearsay anymore. It was digital. Permanent, time-stamped, and retrievable. They weren't the watchers, they were the watched. "Shut it down," Hollins said abruptly. Claudia stared at him. "What?" "Shut down the tablet. Disconnect from the crew network before more gets uploaded." Lars was already moving, but not to comply. He opened his own tablet, tapped into the crew's secure messaging app, and began typing. "To Harper, Orion, legal subject live data. Confirmed, Captain Hollins and F.A. Reynolds are attempting to modify service logs post-incident. Witnessed by me. Device ID 4B67. He hit send. "Too late," he said aloud. Hollins stepped forward. "You little enough," Claudia snapped. "We're already done?" For the first time in hours, her voice held no performative brightness, just a hollow resignation. She sat down on a fold-down crew jump seat, her body sagging like scaffolding, giving way. "I thought he was just another entitled passenger," she murmured. "He was," Lars said, "but he's also the system." Silence fell over the galley. Outside the aircraft, the terminal was preparing. Vanessa's security team coordinated discreetly rerouting foot traffic, blocking press access, and setting up a secure route from the jet bridge to the executive conference suite. In the private car, now idling near Gate 37, Harper reviewed a checklist on her tablet. Media brief drafted. Legal action memo. Ready. Passenger statements filed. Cabin audio/video footage secured. Crew termination protocols initiated. In the cabin, Emily watched passengers file out one by one. Several glanced at Derek's seat, still marked by the untouched bread and water, and shuddered. She was still inside her notebook. Open, her journalist's gaze sweeping across every corner of the cabin, capturing not just events but atmosphere. The air was heavy with implication. Behind her, Claudia and Hollins exited the galley. "Where do we go?" Claudia asked weakly. Lars pointed down the aisle. "Follow the line." She hesitated, then moved. Lars followed, pausing at the bread and water tray. He stared at it for a moment, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small pen. On a napkin, he scribbled 5 words and placed it next to the plate. Some meals cost everything. Then he walked off the plane, no longer as a flight attendant, but as a witness to collapse. The door to the aircraft had barely shut behind the last passenger when the hidden systems Derek had orchestrated months ago came fully alive. Inside a secure control room at Orion Jet Technologies' Manhattan office, a cluster of screens lit up in unison. Harper stood at the center of it all, flanked by legal analysts, cybersecurity engineers, and aviation compliance officers. Each screen displayed synchronized feeds, security camera angles from the first-class cabin, audio logs, and even internal comms chatter between flight crew members. Everything from Gate 43 to JFK was cataloged in real time. Packet 16 received a technician called out includes voice capture of Claudia Reynolds referencing racial profiling, deletion of service logs, and 2 mentions of falsifying FAA records. Harper didn't blink, cross-check timestamps with the internal cabin log, highlight any entries that were altered or removed. She turned to another associate, "Send visual clips to our legal folder. Start with the bread and water tray." Then the quote, "This meal fits you." The room pulsed with quiet urgency. No shouting, no panic, just meticulous dissection. Derek's systems weren't just reactive, they were preemptive. Back at JFK, Derek stepped off the plane into a corridor lit with warm LEDs and shadowed by serious figures in black suits. Vanessa, his head of security, stood waiting. Her sharp bob and expressionless face said everything without a word. Situation crew is in the holding suite. We intercepted Claudia attempting to communicate with external media. Her device has been seized. Captain Hollins is posturing. Lars Wilson is cooperative. Derek nodded. Good, escort them to conference room B. Have PR prepare statement. Type 3, the public integrity version. Vanessa fell into step beside him as they walked down a sealed jet bridge to a private elevator. Emily trailed a few paces behind, still scribbling notes. The weight of what had just transpired hadn't quite settled. Not fully inside the elevator, Derek spoke without looking at her. You filmed more than just the moment, didn't you? I did, Emily answered, calm and direct. I have hours of footage, raw, unedited, including the captain's announcement and Claudia's demeanor during meal service. Hold it for now. Emily tilted her head. You want to let them speak first? No, Derek replied. I want them to lie first. As the elevator opened into a quiet corridor leading to the executive lounge area, Harper's voice came through Derek's earpiece. All logs secured. We intercepted an attempt to access crew deletion tools from Hollins's login ID at 6:58 p.m. We also captured a cockpit-to-galley conversation ordering Claudia to keep the guests calm until we land. Derek's jaw tightened. File it under obstruction and collusion. Prepare transcripts, understood. The corridor opened into the private suite where 3 crew members sat under subtle surveillance. Claudia's posture was rigid, her eyes darting from wall to wall, as if sensing she was being watched. Hollins leaned back, arms crossed, smirking defiantly. Lars sat quietly, hands folded, eyes downcast. Of the 3, he looked the most human. As Derek entered, silence swept the room. Harper appeared at his side, handing him a tablet. Final audit file. The crew's performance rating is dropped to level 1, gross violation of the FAA's 382 compliance rule, racial misconduct, falsified service logs, and attempted data tampering, public or private audit. Derek asked Hybrid Harper, said, We'll release the anonymized data. Keep identities redacted until after internal hearings, unless media pressure demands otherwise. Derek studied the screen. Each violation was cataloged, documented, and cross-referenced, a web of indiscretions that formed a damning portrait. He looked up. I gave you every opportunity. He began, his voice level. No cameras, no confrontation, just a simple chance to offer humanity. You chose hierarchy. Claudia looked away. Hollins rolled his neck. This is absurd, the captain muttered. We've dealt with difficult passengers before. You think this makes you different? I don't think, Derek said. I document. He placed the tablet on the table and tapped once. The screen activated with a still image. Claudia's hand placing the bread and water on a tray marked 2A. A subtitle appeared beneath it. This meal fits you. Then a voice recording began to play, her voice unmistakably. Some people don't seem like they'd care for fine dining. No one spoke. Derek tapped the screen again. The image changed. This time it was a log entry, 6:52 p.m., meal denied due to passenger noncompliance. It was followed by a second version of the log, 6:52 p.m., deleted entry. Then finally the cockpit audio. Hollins' voice, keep him quiet till we land. We'll smooth it over later. When it ended, Derek looked directly at the captain. You flew the plane? Yes, but she flew the culture. Hollins' facade cracked. Claudia began to cry quietly. Lars looked up and simply said thank you. For not looking away, Derek took a breath. Harper, prepare their exits. PR wants pre-release statements signed. Legal begins action review tonight. As Harper moved to execute, Derek turned to Emily. Once I finish with them, you get your interview. Emily nodded, understanding that the camera could wait, but justice could not. The plane had landed, but for Claudia Reynolds, Captain James Hollins, and Lars Wilson, the real descent was only beginning. At JFK's private terminal, a line of black SUVs idled silently under soft floodlights. Security personnel dressed in discreet suits formed a corridor from the jet bridge to the executive lounge. Cameras were already setting up at the public terminals. But Derek Patterson wouldn't be stepping into the public spotlight. At least not yet. This next chapter was personal, calculated, and utterly controlled. Inside the debriefing suite, the air was sharp with tension. The crew sat in silence, their uniforms suddenly looking more like costumes than badges of authority. Claudia's hands trembled slightly as she clasped them in her lap. Hollins shifted in his seat, arms crossed, lips pressed into a thin line. Lars, though quiet, sat with a strange stillness, like someone ready to take accountability. No matter the count, Derek stood at the head of the table. No press, no microphones, just truth. "Let's begin," he said, setting his tablet on the conference table. Harper stood behind him, a silent sentinel with 3 manila folders labeled in red: termination package, ethics violation pending, investigation. "You've each had time to reflect." Derek began tone even, but with underlying gravity. "This isn't just a disciplinary hearing. It's the final stop before a reckoning." Claudia opened her mouth, but Derek raised his hand. Before you speak, know that everything here is being transcribed. Every word you say will go into your employment record and possibly into a federal compliance investigation." She closed her mouth. "First, let's review what this isn't," he continued. "This isn't about a bad meal. It's not about a misunderstood joke. It's not even about a single instance of unprofessional conduct." He pressed a button on the tablet. A holographic projection lit the center of the table, displaying a timeline. It showed a cascading series of events, from check-in to touchdown: dismissive glances, skipped service steps, derogatory remarks, falsified logs, the bread and water, and finally crew attempts to erase their tracks. This is about a systemic attitude, one that condones humiliation as long as it's cloaked in procedure, one that thinks it's acceptable to serve exclusion with a smile. The words "intent doesn't erase" impact appeared in bold above the timeline. Claudia swallowed visibly. Derek turned to Lars. "Mr. Wilson, you submitted an audio file to our security team. Would you confirm its authenticity?" Lars nodded slowly. "It's real. I recorded it the moment I heard Claudia say he hesitated. He probably expected fried chicken." Claudia gasped. "You recorded me," she whispered. "I was tired of pretending I didn't hear it," Lars replied, voice low. "And I wasn't just protecting myself. I was protecting others." "Thank you," Derek said. "That took courage, more than most display in years of service." He turned his gaze on Hollins, Captain Hollins. "You instructed crew members to delete evidence. You referred to me as the guy who should have been taken off before takeoff. FAA policy requires captains to be impartial, arbiters of safety and respect. Would you like to respond?" Hollins leaned forward. "I've flown for 28 years, and in that time I've dealt with all kinds of passengers, some polite, some not. What I did, what I said, it wasn't personal. It was about maintaining order." "Order," Derek repeated. "So your definition of order includes enabling discrimination, condoning cover-ups, and ignoring formal complaints?" The captain didn't answer. Harper placed a printed copy of the FAA's Code 38255 in front of him. "You violated this 7 times in one flight," she said coolly. Derek tapped the screen again. It now displayed media traction metrics, social reach engagement, and rising hashtags. "Bread is not service flying while Black Orion audit." "While this hearing was underway, your story went public." Derek said, "It's not just a compliance issue now, it's a reputational disaster for the airline and for each of you." He paused, letting the gravity settle. "Effective immediately, Claudia Reynolds and Captain James Hollins, your employment with this airline is terminated. You are barred from further employment in leadership positions, pending FAA review." 2 security officers entered the room quietly and stood beside them. "You will surrender your badges, access credentials, and devices before leaving this facility." Claudia broke. "I didn't know who you were," she cried. "If I had..." "And that," Derek said softly, "is exactly the problem." She said nothing more. Lars shifted uncomfortably, expecting his own dismissal. "Mr. Wilson?" Derek said, "You made mistakes. You followed orders when you shouldn't have. But when it mattered most, you told the truth." He gestured to Harper, who handed Lars a different folder. "Redeployment option. If you choose, you may stay with reassignment to the newly created Sky Equity Division. Your experience will help ensure that what happened today never happens again." Lars looked stunned, then nodded slowly. "I want to do better." "We all do," Derek said. As the terminated crew were escorted from the room, the door closed with a soft click behind them. Silence fell again. Emily stepped forward, recording device in hand. "May I?" Derek nodded. Now is the time. She began asking questions about the process, the evidence, the motivations behind the undercover audit. Derek answered each with poise, making it clear this was about more than punishment. This isn't about revenge. It's about restoration, he said. It's about making sure dignity is no longer negotiable. The interview would go live within the hour. The public wouldn't just see the incident. They would see what came after the accountability, the reform, and the CEO who didn't just demand change but led it from the front. Morning sunlight broke through the Manhattan skyline as reporters, legal experts, and industry analysts tuned into the most unexpected press conference in recent airline history. The stage was set in a sleek glass-walled conference room on the 52nd floor of the Orion Jet Technologies headquarters. Derek Patterson stood at the podium, flanked by Harper on one side and Emily Watson on the other, now introduced formally as the investigative journalist who had witnessed the incident firsthand. Below them, outside the building, a growing crowd of supporters, activists, and media gathered holding signs that read, "Dignity is not a luxury and bread is not service." The event was being live-streamed globally across news networks, Twitter, X, LinkedIn, and even TikTok. The whole world was watching. "Good morning." Derek began, his voice measured and calm. "Yesterday I was served a slice of dry bread and a cup of water in first class, not because the airline had no food, but because someone decided I didn't deserve any better." The crowd behind the cameras held their breath. "But this isn't just about one flight," he continued. "It's about a culture where perception overrides policy, where bias masquerades as protocol, where humanity is treated as optional." He paused, letting the silence carry weight. "I've spent my career building systems that run the infrastructure of modern air travel software, that routes planes safely, tools that coordinate crews, platforms that keep passengers moving. But no algorithm, no matter how elegant, can replace human decency." Applause erupted. Online comments surged in the control room upstairs. Harper watched metrics spike in real time. Hundreds of thousands tuning in, tens of thousands commenting live. Derek continued. "As of this morning, I have assumed executive oversight of all customer experience protocols across the merged airline. And effective immediately, I'm announcing 5 major reforms." A screen behind him lit up as he listed them. 1. Sky Equity Division, a new department reporting directly to the CEO, staffed by diversity, ethics, and operations experts with full authority to audit and reform crew behavior. 2. Anonymous cabin evaluators, secret flyers embedded in flights to report on service equality, professionalism, and bias. 3. Mandatory ethics and bias training, quarterly courses required for all frontline and leadership staff with third-party audits. 4. Real-time passenger feedback system, powered by Orion software, allowing instant reports from passengers during flights integrated directly with the new Oversight Division. 5. Zero Tolerance Protocol. Documented violations of bias-related conduct will result in immediate review and suspension pending investigation. "These aren't temporary fixes," Derek said. "These are systemic changes, and they come with consequences." He turned toward the audience again. 2 crew members and 1 captain have been terminated. Their behavior was unacceptable. But the greater failure was that this pattern had been tolerated, covered up, enabled. He didn't say the airline's former name. He didn't have to. "We are done pretending this is about isolated incidents. We are done blaming training gaps, and we are absolutely done serving bread and water to people who've paid for dignity." Emily stepped forward next. "In the past 24 hours," she began, "I've received over 700 direct messages from passengers around the world, Black, brown, Muslim, Asian, disabled, who've been made to feel less than simply because of who they are. Their stories are consistent, painful, and mostly ignored. But not anymore." She glanced at Derek and smiled, because someone finally turned the camera around. Harper then stepped up with a tablet. "We're releasing the full internal audit conducted over the last 48 hours, she announced. "It includes voice logs, cabin video, stills, deleted service entries, and documentation of repeat offender patterns." Reporters leaned forward. This was not just a PR statement. This was a full-scale operational confession and plan for renewal. A reporter asked Mr. Patterson, "How will you ensure this doesn't just become another corporate promise without enforcement?" Derek replied immediately, "By tying executive bonuses to ethical performance metrics, by making diversity audits public, and by empowering people like Lars Wilson, who once stayed silent but found the courage to speak." Gasp. The room turned as Lars walked on stage, no longer in uniform, but wearing a simple gray blazer. He looked nervous, but resolute. "I served on that flight," Lars said. and I failed to intervene when I should have. I let comfort outweigh conscience, but that ends now. He revealed his new title, Deputy of Cabin Ethics, Sky Equity Division. My job is to train, track, and reform, not punish, but protect, because we don't need perfect crew members. We need brave ones. The room burst into applause. Behind the scenes, Vanessa Mitchell, head of security, coordinated incoming legal inquiries. Several civil rights organizations had already requested a formal hearing. The FAA had opened a review into Captain Hollins's conduct, and other airlines began quietly requesting consultations with Orion's new Sky Equity team. The ripple effect had begun. As the press conference wound down, a reporter asked one final question, "Mr. Patterson, what do you say to those who think this is just about scoring a PR win?" Derek didn't blink. "I say this isn't about PR. It's about precedent." He stepped away from the podium. As the feed ended, the social media ecosystem ignited with support, solidarity, and personal stories. From taxi drivers to CEOs, students to professors, the hashtags grew louder. Bread is not. Service was now more than a protest. It was a promise. And for Derek, that was just the beginning. The next morning, the world woke to a headline that spread like wildfire across every major platform. Black CEO denied first-class meal launches. Industry reform overnight. Derek Patterson's story had not just trended, it had triggered a movement. From LinkedIn posts to TikTok explainers, corporate boardrooms to college campuses, a new conversation was taking hold. What does respect and service really mean, and who decides who deserves it? But for Derek, the goal had never been personal redemption. It was systemic restoration. He stood once more at a podium, this time in front of a packed audience at the Global Aviation Leadership Summit in Washington, D.C. This wasn't about press anymore. This was policy. In the front row sat executives from Delta, Emirates, Lufthansa, and dozens more who just days earlier had quietly hoped the story would pass. Now they were here taking notes. Derek's voice was steady as ever. "I didn't grow up dreaming about airplanes or boardrooms. I grew up watching my mother get ignored by waiters. My father get followed in stores. I learned early that invisibility wasn't just a feeling. It was a strategy people used to protect their comfort. But comfort should never come at the cost of someone else's dignity." The crowd sat in silence, not because they were bored, but because they finally understood they were not listening to a speech. They were witnessing a blueprint. He outlined the Sky Equity Framework, a replicable model for eliminating bias in customer-facing industries. It wasn't just for airlines, it was scalable to hotels, banks, hospitals, even universities. Visibility metrics. Track who gets ignored, not just who complains. Intervention incentives. Reward staff who speak up, not just those who meet performance quotas. 3. Bias simulation labs. Mandatory role reversal training for crew and management. 4. Third-party evaluations. Anonymous audits conducted by outside ethics firms. 5. Passenger protection protocol. Real-time reporting system that connects directly to leadership. Every reform was backed by live data from the Orion jet system already in place. And more importantly, by stories like Derek's, like Emily's, like the thousands that had flooded in under the hashtag Flying While Black and its broader cousin, Bread is not service on stage. Derek paused, then said the words that would be quoted for years. "This isn't about bread, and it's not even about flights. It's about the quiet decisions we make that tell someone you're not enough, not classy enough, not white enough, not rich enough. Those decisions aren't invisible. They leave marks, and those marks don't fade. They compound in the audience." Emily Watson sat beside Vanessa Mitchell and Harper, documenting the moment for her upcoming feature in The Atlantic. But even she lowered her pen for a second to simply listen. "And here's the thing," Derek continued, "you don't have to be racist to uphold a racist culture. You just have to say nothing. You just have to laugh at the joke. Skip the row, serve the bread, and walk away." A beat. The weight of those words hit every executive in the room. Silence is how cultures of bias survive. Courage is how we dismantle them. Applause erupted. Not just polite, not just obligatory. This was the kind of applause that comes with awakening. After the summit, Derek received calls from the Department of Transportation, from international aviation regulators, from tech companies and investment banks, who wanted to implement similar accountability models in their organizations. Quiet dignity had become loud transformation. Later that evening, back at Orion's Manhattan headquarters, Derek sat alone in his office, overlooking the city skyline. Jazz music hummed softly in the background. his favorite monk track. On his desk sat a single memento, the untouched slice of bread and cup of water sealed in a glass display box engraved with the words, "This meal fits you." It wasn't a trophy. It was a reminder. He picked up a handwritten letter that had arrived earlier from a former flight attendant. "I used to be a Claudia. I didn't mean harm, but I didn't stop it either. After seeing what happened on your flight, I realized I need to change. I'm applying to join the Sky Equity training team." Derek smiled faintly. This was why it had mattered. Down the hallway, Harper knocked and entered. "You ready for the interview?" she asked. "Let's do it," Derek replied. In the studio, he faced a camera crew broadcasting live to millions for an exclusive primetime interview. The host's first question was simple. "Mr. Patterson, what would you say is the moral of this whole story?" Derek leaned forward slightly, eyes calm, voice low and sure. "Don't let anyone decide your worth by the seat you're in," and then turning directly to camera. "Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to catch more gripping stories like this. Thanks for watching, and see you next time."